on the Science of Near-Death Experience, published in Esoterica. Theosophical Society in England, Spring Issue 2021, by Antti Savanainen. It is often said that there can be no knowledge, let alone scientific knowledge, about the afterlife. However, there is a large body of research on the near-death experience, NDE, that meets the criteria of science. Most of the research on the NDE makes use of medical data and interviews gathered from those who have been resuscitated. Interviews have been conducted on people who had NDEs a long time previously, and with those who have had NDEs in the very recent past. The picture emerging from these studies is quite consistent, although not all people describe all the stages of the NDE. The first reported stage is usually a feeling of deep peace. All pain has ceased. This is followed by an out-of-body experience. NDErs can see and hear, often from the vantage point of a ceiling, what is going on around them. For instance, they are able to describe the resuscitation in quite a detail. They also report a lucid and heightened awareness despite the fact that their brain functioning is severely compromised, for example because of a heart attack. About 30% of Western NDErs report transitions to another realm, sometimes described as passing through a long tunnel, which can be perceived as dark or multicolored. At any rate, the passage is very fast. The tunnel leads to a light that is exceptionally bright, but not blinding. The experience of the light is accompanied by an overwhelming feeling of bliss, unconditional love, and acceptance. Often people meet deceased relatives, friends, and other beings of light. Some NDErs, 13% in studies involving Western subjects, report a panoramic life review, which may contain the person's whole life in a momentary flash or just a few highlights. The life review takes place very quickly, but the NDErs can follow it intensively. Some report that they experience how their thoughts, words, and actions affected other people. There is a moral element in the life review that makes it possible for the person to evaluate his or her past life objectively. However, this is not described as judging in the sense of condemning. The life review is usually experienced in the light, but it can also happen before entering the light. It's interesting to note that the life review has been aptly described in theosophical sources for well over 100 years ago. A theosophical explanation of the objective nature of life review is that the personality is illuminated with the light of her higher self. During the NDE, people can gain access to universal knowledge, making it possible to understand everything, their own lives as well as why people do what they do. Life and existence have a deep meaning. Everything is connected in unity. At the end of the NDE, there is the perception of a border. They realize intuitively, or it is explained by the light being, that should they cross the border, they would not be able to resume their lives on earth. The NDE is such a blissful experience that it is hard to come back into the sick, damaged body. The decision becomes easier when the NDER remembers or is reminded of children or other people who need him. A very small fraction of the NDEs are frightening. Typically 1–2%. People experiencing a frightening NDE may have attempted suicide, have taken an overdose of drugs, or they may have been ordinary people with strong fears of dying at the beginning of the NDE, after leaving their bodies. These people have entered into a dark, meaningless void filled with loneliness and despair. They may sense the presence of an evil force and hear horrific voices. Some describe a place very similar to images of the traditional hell. However, these very unpleasant experiences may have a positive effect. Some people have taken the experience as a warning and a chance to change their lives for the better. The NDE is a life-changing experience that can greatly affect the person's values and outlook on life. The Dutch cardiologist Pim van Lommel and his colleagues published in 2001 a longitudinal, prospective study on the NDE. This study was published in The Lancet, which is one of the most prestigious journals in medicine. The study documented significant differences between the NDErs and the control group. That is, people who had had a heart attack with no NDE. There were life changes in both groups, but the NDE group had undergone more profound changes. The NDE group showed more acceptance to others, and they were more loving and empathetic. Their interest in spirituality had increased, whereas it had decreased in the control group. In addition, Van Lommel's study concurred with earlier research indicating a decline in religious affiliation among NDErs. Whereas church attendance increased to some extent in the control group, the NDE group had less interest in money, possessions, and social norms. Fear of death had decreased in both groups, but more strongly so in the NDE group. Belief in life after death was more prominent in the NDE group than in the control group. Many of the NDErs said that they had a very acute sense of other people's emotions and that they had acquired paranormal abilities, although the validity of this claim was not investigated by Van Lommel's research team. Love for oneself, others, and nature are important for people who have had NDEs. These changes are clearly evident in the following extract. I'm no longer afraid of death, because I'll never forget what happened to me there. Now I'm certain that life goes on. Over the years I've undergone a number of changes. I feel a strong connection with nature. I've acquired a great sense of justice. I've become more patient and peaceful. My anger is a thing of the past. I feel a strong urge to never lie again. I'd rather keep silent than tell a little white lie. I do struggle with deadlines. Things must get done within a certain time. I enjoy life immensely. I believe that people have stopped living from the heart. Van Lommel observes that usually people with the NDE become more forgiving, tolerant, and compassionate. To put it concisely, they seek to express unconditional love. In addition, Van Lommel notes that life reviews speak of a cosmic law. Whatever we do to another person will ultimately have an effect on us as well. Everything is interconnected. This cosmic law is known as karma in the Eastern religions and in Theosophy. Although the empirical evidence on the NDE is substantial, there are various interpretations of the NDE experience. Mainstream science appears to assume that all NDEs are, in one way or another, produced by the brain. Nevertheless, NDE researchers have presented quite strong arguments that the brain-based explanatory models are not plausible in explaining the NDE, which strongly suggests that a human being has a spiritual aspect which survives death. This is also the view taught by Theosophy.